She was the sweet girl next door, crushing on the hottest star in the world. He saw her as a sister, not a lover. When she finally confessed, everything changed. But the real shock came after one night together and what he revealed in a memoir years later. She hasn't forgiven him. At 72, will she finally speak? Stay tuned. This story only gets darker. It all started the moment the cameras rolled on the Partridge family. Susan Dey was just a teenager when she landed the role of Laurie Partridge and was suddenly thrust into fame alongside David Cassidy. Already hailed as the ultimate teen heartthrob, he had the looks, the voice, the charisma that made millions of girls around the world plaster his posters on their bedroom walls. What no one knew, though, was that Susan was quietly falling for him too. Behind her perfectly delivered lines and calm smile, Susan was living a completely different reality. Every rehearsal, every on-set lunch, every shared laugh deepened her crush on David. To her, he wasn't just the dreamboat every girl wanted. He was someone she saw as her confidant, her equal, and maybe, if fate allowed it, something much more. But David never saw it that way. In his mind, Susan was family. Not in a cold way, but in the most devastating way possible for a young girl in love. He viewed her as a sister, and that made things unbearable for Susan. Imagine being around the very person you're head over heels for day after day, knowing he's blind to your feelings. For years, she carried that secret, never letting it slip on set, never letting the tabloids catch wind. While David flirted with guest stars and drowned in fan mail, Susan played the role of the sweet, unaffected co-star. But under the surface, she was struggling with something much heavier than just unreturned affection. Even years later, David admitted he could sense something between them. He even said he knew Susan had feelings, but at the time, he brushed it off, maybe because he didn't want to ruin the professional bond, or because he was too busy enjoying his status as the world's most desired teen idol. For Susan, though, that ignorance cut deep. She couldn't shake the idea that her feelings weren't just a silly crush, they were real. And yet, she stayed quiet, choosing to protect herself from embarrassment, while also protecting David's reputation. After all, the chemistry of the show was built on the illusion of a wholesome family, not scandal. And she couldn't risk breaking that illusion with a messy off-screen romance that could have destroyed everything. As her feelings grew stronger, something else began to brew inside Susan. The pressure of fame. The attention she didn't always want, and the quiet heartbreak she endured were taking a toll. Her personal struggles were intensifying behind the curtain and would soon collide with her secret love in a way no one saw coming. What came next wasn't just a hidden crush anymore. It was Susan's silent war with herself, and it nearly consumed her. Her feelings for David didn't just stay in her heart. They became tangled in something far darker. While the world saw a shining star, Susan was quietly battling a secret that almost broke her. On screen, Susan Dey was radiant, the picture-perfect teenager that every young girl wanted to be. But behind the carefully rehearsed lines and her charming smile, she was fighting a battle few could imagine. The cameras captured her beauty, talent, and seemingly effortless grace. But they didn't capture the insecurities that gnawed at her when the lights went off. While she silently pined for David Cassidy, Susan was also waging war against her own body. The pressure of fame had come fast. She wasn't a seasoned actress when the Partridge family launched. She was practically a child. Suddenly, she was in front of millions. And with every magazine cover and fan letter came another reminder that she had to look flawless, thin, and perfect. That kind of spotlight wasn't just blinding, it was suffocating as the years rolled on. Susan slipped into a dangerous cycle. She developed severe anorexia, which became the darkest shadow in her life. It wasn't just about appearances, it was about control. In a world where she couldn't control her fame, her image, or her feelings for David, she turned to the one thing she could: food, or more accurately, the denial of it. Even her castmates noticed she was shrinking before their eyes, but no one dared confront her. Back then, mental health and eating disorders weren't openly discussed, and the silence only made it worse. She felt isolated, trapped inside a body she no longer trusted. Meanwhile, David Cassidy was skyrocketing outward, adored worldwide, selling out arenas, mobbed by fans, living the dream of every young star. And there Susan was standing right beside him, secretly breaking apart. Imagine being madly in love with someone, while convincing yourself you're not good enough to be loved back. That's the storm Susan lived through. Her crush on David wasn't a light-hearted teen fantasy. It became tied to her struggle with self-worth. Each smile he flashed at fans, each rumor of a new girl in his life. Each time he overlooked her feelings, chipped away at her silently. She grew thinner, but the weight of her pain grew heavier. Yet she stayed professional, never letting the tabloids see her suffering or David know how much he meant to her. Eventually, Susan's silence broke. The weight of her hidden feelings and her personal struggles pushed her to a breaking point. When it finally happened, it wasn't on set or during an interview. It was in private, at David's home. One night, Susan let it all out. No more hiding. No more pretending to be just the co-star or sister figure David had placed her in. She poured out her feelings in a confession that reportedly lasted 3 hours. Imagine holding back every thought, ache, and unspoken word for years, only to release it all at once. That's exactly what Susan did. Telling David she was in love with him and letting him see the vulnerability she had been protecting so fiercely. It wasn't just a casual crush anymore. It was a raw flood of emotions she had bottled up since their teenage years on the Partridge Family. David, confident and playful, didn't know how to respond to the outside world. But the moment marked their relationship forever. Confronted by Susan's honesty, he froze. He admitted later that he cared for her deeply and even said he knew she had feelings for him all along. But he couldn't bring himself to see her as more than what she had always been in his eyes. Family. The irony was cruel. She had finally mustered the courage to bare her soul, and yet the one person she wanted most didn't return the words. It was devastating. But while David didn't initially see her as more than a friend, something about Susan's confession lingered with him. Something stirred, maybe curiosity, maybe guilt, or maybe the realization that he had overlooked someone who had always been right beside him. Whatever it was, it set the stage for a moment that would forever change the dynamic between them. A moment that crossed the line from friendship into something far more complicated. Not long after Susan's 3-hour confession, the inevitable happened. They spent the night together, but instead of leading to love, that night left Susan humiliated in David, admitting something shocking about her that would haunt their relationship forever. After years of tension, whispers, and unspoken longing, Susan Day and David Cassidy crossed the line from friends and co-stars into something more. For Susan, it was the culmination of everything she had dreamed about since the early days of the Partridge Family. The reality, however, was nothing like the fantasy she had built in her mind. The two ended up spending the night together, an encounter fans would never have guessed at during the show's wholesome run. Instead of the start of a love story, it quickly became one of the most awkward chapters in their relationship. David later admitted the spark simply wasn't there. He claimed the chemistry millions of fans saw on screen didn't translate once the cameras were off. For Susan, this was crushing. She had built up years of unspoken passion, only to discover that the man she adored didn't feel the same way. It was made worse by David's brutally candid comments afterward. In his memoir, he confessed that the night left him disappointed, saying she wasn't dirty enough for him. Cruel remark that reduced her heartfelt confession into a story of rejection and humiliation. Those words stung not only because of that one night, but because they revealed how differently the two had viewed their relationship. For Susan, it was a vulnerable leap of faith. For David, it was little more than curiosity, an experiment, something to shrug off when it didn't work. The imbalance was staggering, planting a wound between them that never fully healed. In Hollywood, co-star romances are common. But this story was haunting because of the emotional weight Susan had placed on it. This wasn't just another fling for her. It was everything she had wanted and feared. To have it dismissed so bluntly, even mocked later in print, was devastating. The consequences went beyond embarrassment. This failed romance didn't just bruise Susan. It began to fracture the foundation of their friendship. After all, how do you go back to being just friends when the moment you finally connect is described as a disappointment? From then on, things were never quite the same. An invisible wall formed, tension growing heavier with time. eventually turning into complete silence. While Susan walked away humiliated, David carried his own guilt. Years later, in a shocking twist, he admitted he still loved her in a special way. Yet that confession only deepened the rift and set the stage for their final permanent fallout. Time passed, and the frenzy of the Partridge family faded. David Cassidy's teen idol status slowly dimmed, and Susan Dey stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight. But their tangled story was far from over. The one night they shared left Susan humiliated and David detached. Yet years later, Cassidy admitted things weren't so simple. In his 1994 memoir, Come On, Get Happy, Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family Bus, David shocked readers by pulling back the curtain on what really happened. He admitted they had slept together, but downplayed it cruelly, saying Susan wasn't dirty enough for him. That line wasn't just careless. It was a dagger, turning their private moment into public fodder. Susan never forgave him for it. Hidden between the biting words, though, was a trace of regret. David confessed he always loved Susan, just not in the way she wanted. He called it a special kind of love. It's the kind you feel for someone who means more than just a co-star, but not quite enough to risk everything for. It was a confusing half-truth that sounded more like guilt than affection. And for Susan, it wasn't enough. The fallout was brutal. Susan felt betrayed not only by the memoir, but by David's decision to turn her most vulnerable moment into a story for the masses. That betrayal cemented her silence. She cut ties completely, refusing to attend Partridge family reunions, comment in interviews, or ever speak to David again. Fans begged for a reunion, but Susan's absence became the loudest statement of all. David later admitted he regretted how he handled it, knowing his words had hurt her and expressing sorrow that their relationship ended in silence rather than friendship. By then, it was too late. The damage was done, and Susan had made her choice: distance. For decades, their once close friendship became nothing more than a ghost of what might have been. The world remembered them as Laurie and Keith Partridge. But behind the scenes, they were two people forever divided by one night and one book. The fallout wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Susan didn't just lose a friend. She lost the one person she had trusted enough to bare her soul to. When he broke that trust, she sealed the door shut for good. Her silence didn't come from heartbreak alone. It was fueled by something even darker. A betrayal by the very system meant to protect her left her scarred. And from that moment on, she vowed never to speak publicly again, after David Cassidy's memoir exposed their private history to the world. Susan Dey made a choice that stunned fans. She vanished from the narrative. No interviews about David, no cast reunions, no nostalgic talk show stories. She turned her back on the Partridge family legacy, at least when it came to revisiting it with her former castmates. And that silence became louder than any words she could have spoken. People speculated endlessly. Was it anger? Heartbreak? Or the humiliation of seeing her most vulnerable moment reduced to a cruel punchline in print? The truth was all of that and more. Susan had already endured years of inner battles, struggling with anorexia, the relentless scrutiny of fame, and her unrequited love for David Cassidy. His memoir felt like the final betrayal. Instead of being remembered as his close friend and confidant, she was portrayed as a failed conquest, a depiction that cut deep, and Susan never recovered. There was another piece to her silence that few people knew. After the Partridge family, Susan sought peace and healing through support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, hoping to step away from the industry machine and find real human connection outside the cameras and lights. But even there, she wasn't safe. Rumors suggest a tabloid infiltrated her AA group, leaking details meant to remain confidential. That violation of trust only reinforced her decision to shut out the public. If even a sacred space like AA could be exploited, how could she ever risk opening herself up again? So, she didn't. Susan refused cast reunions, even when the rest of the Partridge family came together. Fans noticed her absence every time, and her silence only fueled more questions. But she stayed consistent. She would not give David Cassidy or the media the satisfaction of another word. To her, the silence was the only way to reclaim power over a story that had been taken from her. Her silence was deliberate. Each refusal to give an interview, each skipped reunion. Each unspoken word was her way of reminding the world that some wounds don't heal just because time passes. David himself seemed to regret how things ended. In later interviews, he spoke warmly of Susan, even calling her beautiful and talented. But those words came too late. Susan had already drawn the line, and she never crossed it. Her silence became her statement. Now, at 72, whispers suggest she may finally be ready to break it. Could decades of secrecy be undone by a single revelation? The mystery surrounding her silence is as powerful as ever. For decades, she has remained one of Hollywood's most elusive figures, almost like a ghost of her own fame. While other cast members leaned into nostalgia, Susan walked away. No reunions, no tell-all memoirs, no behind-the-scenes interviews. The question still lingers: what truth has she been holding on to all this time? The timing is especially haunting. After David Cassidy passed away in 2017, many wondered if Susan would finally speak. Fans expected a heartfelt statement, some kind of closure, perhaps even a confession of the complicated love that bound them. But instead, there was nothing. That absence spoke volumes. Some believe her silence was a final act of defiance, a refusal to give David or the media the last word. Others think it was grief she simply couldn't express publicly. Now, whispers suggest she may finally be ready to tell her side. At 72, she has little to lose and everything to gain by reclaiming her story. Imagine the weight of carrying a secret for over 50 years. Through the highs of fame, the struggles with her health, and the sting of betrayal. To release it now could be both cathartic and explosive. Insiders claim she has been approached multiple times with offers to write her own memoir, each promising to give her the platform David once stole from her. If she accepts, it won't be just another celebrity book, it would be the final piece of a puzzle that has captivated fans for decades. What did she really feel about David? Did she ever forgive him privately, even if she never spoke to him again? And most chilling of all, what details has she hidden that even David never knew? Susan Day has lived most of her adult life in quiet retreat, away from cameras. Maybe that's exactly why her potential confession carries such power. Unlike other stars who spill everything for attention, Susan's silence has given her words a currency far greater than gossip. If she speaks, the world will listen. No one knows if she will ever fully open up. But one thing is certain, at 72, the clock is ticking. If she decides to finally reveal what really happened between her and David Cassidy, it will be one of the most shocking Hollywood revelations of all time. Fans who grew up idolizing the Partridges will finally see the dark, unpolished truth behind the perfect family facade. After half a century of silence, one question remains: when Susan Day finally speaks, will it be a story of forgiveness or a revelation that shatters everything we thought we knew about her and David Cassidy forever?